Audio from external sources is used throughout this episode. Please note that the opinions, ideas, and theories proposed by these sources may not necessarily reflect the views of the Sovryn Tech X hosts. Thanks for listening.
Power on.
The following is a presentation of the Sovryn podcast feed.
How bad is nutrition science? So much worse than you think. That's the topic of this week's Healthcare Triage. Not long ago, I was made nauseous by some news on a new nutrition study. You might have seen headlines like this one at CNN. A small glass of juice or soda a day is linked to increased risk of cancer, study finds. You might also have seen my tweet on it. I appreciate you keeping me in business, but, to the research, if I can call it that. This was published in the BMJ. I mean, this is not a predatory journal here. The BMJ. Sugary drink consumption and risk of cancer. Results from the Nutrinet Santé prospective cohort. This was a cohort study using data from the French Nutrinet Santé cohort. More than 100,000 participants, followed up for a median of 5 years. Members of the cohort measured the consumption of sugary drinks and diet sodas through repeated 24-hour diet diaries. The main outcome of interest was the risk of breast, prostate, and colorectal cancers, as well as overall cancer rates. The researchers adjusted for age, sex, energy intake without alcohol, sugar intake from other dietary sources, alcohol, sodium, lipid and fruit and vegetable intakes, body mass index, height, physical activity, smoking status, the number of 24-hour dietary records, family history of cancer, education, and a host of clinical conditions. And they found that drinking sugary beverages was associated with an increased risk of overall cancer, hazard ratio 1.18 for each drink per day, breast cancer, ratio 1.22. Oh, and diet beverages were not, but let's just stick a pin in that and move on. 100% juice was associated with cancer with a hazard ratio of 1.12. But I'm not going to ask you to overthink any of this, because it's a perfect example of how nutrition research can often fail us. We find small odds ratios or hazard ratios in big cohorts that are statistically significant, but not really clinically significant, and then we run with it. We see an association, which is all this is, and assume causality. We cherry-pick the study, don't discuss other findings or talk about other diseases, and we run with it. But this is so much worse. The first clue was something I noticed in the abstract. See the part I highlighted there? The dietary records were designed to register participants' usual consumption for 3,300 different food and beverage items. 3,300? Man, it's lucky that their main outcome of interest, beverages, was significant, right? Oh no. And for the next part, I have to acknowledge Tamar Haspel, who's a James Beard-winning Washington Post columnist who writes on food-related stuff. She's amazing, and all she asked in addition to my crediting her here was for you to follow her on Twitter, @Tamar Haspel, so go do that. At the bottom of the abstract, you'll see a clinicaltrials.gov study registration. These pre-registrations exist, so researchers can't change the rules after the trial to try and find significant results. They can't, for instance, make up new outcomes just because they were the ones that they found to be significant. I was too lazy to go check the study registration. Tamar wasn't. Here are the primary outcome measures that they plan to analyze in that pre-registration. All cancers, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, all other metabolic syndromes, hypertension, depression, migraines, rheumatoid arthritis, cognitive decline, quality of life, weight, and height. Basically everything under the sun, all diseases. And what do they plan to run against these? All the nutrients they're collecting, all the foods they're collecting, all the dietary patterns they're collecting. And then I guess they're throwing all these things against the wall, and whichever are positive are going to get published. The purpose of pre-registration is to force scientists to declare their hypotheses a priori if they register every possible outcome and declare thousands of potential independent variables, and they selectively report only on the positive results. Pre-registration is useless. Why did they publish only on these select cancers? Why cancer first? Why sugary beverages? Why do you think? If they'd selected one of the likely gazillion negative findings, do you think they would have been published in the BMJ? Everyone's at fault here. The registration, the scientists should know better. The journal too, but all of this would be only in the ivory tower if the media and all of us didn't fall for it again and again and again.
Ellen Sovryn, biochemical engineer and sexpert. Dr. Brian Sovryn, SecOps specialist and master of the triple black arts. 2 hosts.
One mind-blowing show.
The latest evolution of science, technology, health, entertainment, and history, as only Sovryn Tech could provide. It's Sovryn Tech.
Woo, just coming off of watching the season finale of season 1 of Stargate Universe. and I mean, really, boy, what a cliffhanger on that one. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about
me.
Yeah, well, let's talk about you. I'll talk about you all day. I do. But
I'm here to set this place on fire.
Yeah. But we've got plenty to get into in this Sovryn Tech X, and of course that means I'm being joined by none other than Mrs. Ellen Sovryn. Wow, all the energy going on. Yeah, we've got some things to get into. In fact, so we released an episode. First off, welcome to the show, Ellen.
Thanks for having me.
We just released a few days ago an episode that we actually recorded. So right now we're in March of 2024.
Wow.
I know.
Hard to believe.
That is hard to believe. Yeah, all kinds like next month, Crisis in Infinity Earths is going to happen. Anyway, or Infinite Earths, however you want to pronounce that. Okay. So anyway, we just released an episode that we actually recorded in January, early January, January 6th, in fact, 2024. Finally got it out there.
Finally. You can tell it's a bit dated. Like, the audio quality is different.
Yeah.
We're talking about things happening that were multiple episodes in the past.
Yes, exactly. So actually, it kind of worked out well, though, because when we release, for a few different reasons. One is, like, I had to get the fundraiser ready that I talked about at the opening of that episode, which I'll also talk about here. And the fruits of that fundraiser are actually already taking place. In fact, you mentioned the audio quality difference. We are in front of a very nice pair of professional microphones, already due to donations from people, from listeners.
Yeah, thank you very much, by the way.
Yeah, totally. It's great to have the 2 separate microphone situation, because before we were sharing a mic.
This is so much nicer.
Yes.
Yeah, we each get our own space and our own microphone now.
Exactly. Yeah, it's great. And hopefully you don't hear as many sounds. You don't hear us like blowing ass as much, or the chairs moving or whatever.
Readjusting because I'm leaning forward to speak into the microphone.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so of course people can go to fundraiser.sovryntech.com if they want to donate to that. And it's all for upgrading equipment so that you and I, Mrs. Sovryn and I, there's so much we have planned that we want to do. And we have a whole new show getting planned out. We've got a lot going on, but it's going to up the game of everything that we do, including Sovryn Tech, so much. It'd be a huge help. And one of the biggest parts of it is to start doing video.
And you guys know how seriously Brian takes technology. I mean, he's been doing Sovryn Tech for over a decade. He knows what equipment he wants.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I know exactly what, like, the shopping list is there, and the most expensive part of it, again, the fundraiser is to try and get 5,000. If we get close, great. If it goes over, even better, because it's just more we can put into the show, and into our projects.
So ultimately, this value is going to be returned back to the listeners.
Yeah. By a lot. Yeah. And again, the biggest part of this is getting a machine that can, computer, that can really handle the video editing and processing and all of that, among other things. And it's going to be serious stuff. I mean, anyway, I talked about it somewhat on Patreon Q&As. So I'm not going to recover that ground here, but if anyone wants to donate, there have already been so many gracious people that have donated. Just go to fundraiser.sovryntech.com for that. So that out of the way. we actually have a lot of response from the last episode that we did.
We do?
Yes, and not only that, but the opening of the previous Sovereign Tech X that we did, where we kind of talked about manifesting and all this stuff, you talked about a book that you were reading by Dr. Michael Greger, who we are both big fans of, called How Not to Age. And at that stage, at that point, I don't think I had even started reading it yet.
Yeah, I don't think you did.
No, and you were just getting into it. Mm-hmm. But now, actually, both of us, at this point in March 2024, we've actually both finished the book.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be worthwhile, partly because it really did spawn a lot of conversation, and inspire a lot of conversation. I thought it'd be cool to get in like the full review, which we actually said we would do in that previous episode. So folks, you don't have to wait long. You're getting the full review now. And I want to get into some of the questions and comments that were made about our previous episode that come from the Discord channel. That's usually for patrons only, but because it's referencing a public episode, I think it's fitting to get into it here. I might anonymize the names, but that's about it. And then we've got maybe some other payoffs that we need to do from the last episode that we mentioned that we never got into, which might be a lot of fun. And then I'd like to do a little movie review, but I want to put this out there. So we're actually recording this on March 2nd, 2024. Now on March 1st, 2024, on opening day, you and I, Ellen, and of course, Robin Freebeard, we went and saw Dune Part 2. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this. This is something we're going to get into more in the future. But we did see the movie. Do you want to make a very short comment on how you feel about the film, Ellen, or do you want to just...
Yeah, so
you
read a review to me earlier that really resonated with how I felt about the movie. And I think it was something like, it's awe-inspiring, thematic, and hollow. And I'd say that about sums it up.
Yeah, it was from Forbes. I thought it was a pretty good review. It was one of the only reviews that I read, and no spoilers here, folks. It was one of the only reviews I read where they were actually saying, what the hell did they do with the character of Chani? Like, what happened there? And it's a fair point to bring up. So
yeah, and how different it is from the source material.
Yeah. I mean, it's something, and actually this will speak to the movie review we're going to do later. And I guess I'll mention it at the top here, what we're going to review. We're going to review Salem's Lot, the classic from a miniseries made from 1979.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, that's another one where I think, because look, the reality that we have to, speaking of books, because we're about to talk about How Not to Age as well, speaking of books overall, the reality is when you take a book to the screen, yeah, sometimes changes have to get made. I understand that. And with Dune, honestly, it's practically impossible. Harlan Ellison always said that there's no way really a movie could ever get made about that book. It's a miracle that anyone would even try. And he actually loved the David Lynch version of Dune. In some ways, just because of the effort, just because he, at least they fucking tried. But anyway, so I get it sometimes that you have to make some changes, but then there's points where it's like, well, wait, you didn't have to make that kind of a change.
Right.
That doesn't have anything to do with translating, with allowing for a fidelity in translation from page to screen. That's just not there. And I agree with what you said. Yes. I mean, it's a gorgeous movie. The music's not, but visually
it's stunning.
It's very stunning. But I mean, the short things I'm going to say here before, and we'll get into a bigger review in the future, not in this episode, but in the future. I think this whole thing is terribly miscast. There's very few people, if any, on the cast that I actually think fit or that I like. The music isn't music, it's just sound. And yeah, everything feels very hollow overall. It just doesn't, I don't want to say it's empty calories, but it just feels hollow. And there's things that they should have changed that they didn't. And anyway, the review on Forbes, I definitely recommend people read that because that's one of the better reviews that I had seen. But there's a lot to talk about with this movie. So anyway, we have seen it. I'm not saying it's a bad film, but I'm also not going to say it's a great film. How do you feel about that statement, Ellen?
I really liked it as a movie.
Yeah.
But being somebody who has read the books and really loves the books and the messages that they get across.
As you do. Yeah.
I did find this falling short, unfortunately.
Right.
I understand why people who may have only read the first Dune book or maybe have never read the book at all would love this movie.
Right.
I really get it. But knowing that there's a much larger story going on than just what happens in the first Dune book, to me, it did fall short of expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the last thing I'm going to say on it here is I rank it at number 3 as far as adaptations. Like, I put the David Lynch Dune at the top, the miniseries, the 2000 Frank Herbert's Dune miniseries under that, and then, then these movies sit there. And we are going to get a third one, as far as I know. Hans Zimmer came right out and said that, I was told to start writing the music for the third one. So that's about as good a confirmation as you can get, because he's not going to do that without a paycheck. So anyway, someone who doesn't get a paycheck for the work that he does, that would be Dr. Michael Greger, at least as far as his books. My understanding is that he doesn't take any profits from the sales of his books. Whatever that says about his books, for some people that means something. For others, they think it's just a cheap marketing ploy. I don't think it's a cheap marketing ploy, but regardless, would this be like the 4th book, I guess we would say, in kind of his larger series? You have How Not to Die, How Not to Diet, How to Survive a Pandemic, and then this one, which just came out in December of 2023, that being How Not to Age. My opinion, all 4 of these books are absolute must-reads and must-owns.
Yes, and I would throw in there Carbophobia as well. But
that's one of his early books.
Yes.
Smaller, but very worthwhile, please.
Yeah, something that was written much, longer in the past.
Yes.
It doesn't exactly fall into this category of how not to so-and-so.
Right.
So I really think that these 4 books that he's written are, such a comprehensive guide for health, for just life for the majority of people. And they have brilliant titles, right? I find it fascinating. Choosing a title for a book, How Not to Die. I remember talking about this with one of my friends. He was saying, I don't know when I should read this book, now or after I read How to Read a Book. Because if I if I don't know how to read a book, how can I understand how not to die?
Yeah, right. That's funny.
But if I die, then I won't know how to read a book because I'll be dead.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, just to touch on that quickly, like I do like the titles are clever. It's kind of like how the Idiot's Guides became popular in the 90s and in the early aughts.
Oh, you mean the dummy guide to...
Yeah, well, there's like the Beginner's Guide, there's the Idiot's Guide, or this X for Dummies, whatever that is. X is for Dummies, but that's just because of who owns it, but that's a side subject. Sorry, go ahead. Continue with your thoughts on the book.
Yeah, I think we're just introducing the review that we're going to be doing for this book. How Not to Age, which is the most recent book by Dr. Michael Greger. You and I both finished it, as you said earlier. And if you, I would highly recommend reading this book first and foremost, but if you feel like you don't have the time or the attention span, just look at the cover. The cover gives you all of the answers that you need to know. And he does this on all of his books. He makes artwork that has fruits and vegetables and whatever other foods that spell out the title of the book.
Right.
And for this one, he uses a bunch of walnuts, almonds, blueberries, spinach. It looks like a salad.
Right.
It looks delicious.
And it's spelling out not age.
Yeah, how not to age.
Right.
And that's kind of answering the question that's posed
right
there
on the front
inherently.
cover.
Right.
Yeah.
How not to age.
Which is funny because you can judge this book by its cover.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I want to let me ask you a quick question. Do you think, like, yes, this book can be read on its own, but do you think it's helpful to read his entire, shall we call it his How series of like 4 books, not counting cookbooks? Do you think it's worthwhile to read all of them?
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
And they all serve a different purpose.
Right.
I think overall they give somewhat similar advice. How to Survive a Pandemic kind of stands out from the rest because obviously that's talking about the incarnation of pandemics.
Yeah, right.
Where
right.
viruses are actually generated, how they spread, and what you can do to defy them. This book, How Not to Age, as well as How Not to Die and How Not to Diet, they're generally food focused.
Yeah.
And I think that is very important because basically what he's saying with these books is that you can have an effect on the outcomes of your life as you progress. Like, are you going to die via long-term illness, or is it going to be something that you prevent through diet? With this book, are you going to age as a healthy, vibrant individual, or are you going to age the way that, unfortunately, the majority of Americans age now, which is, the last 30 years of their life being spent crippled or chronically ill and not really able to care for themselves.
Yeah.
Or even experiencing some sort of mental illness that causes loss of memory and loss of functionality.
Right.
So these books are really about how you can take control of the outcomes of your health through diet. And he tries to present the greatest preponderance of evidence for why and how you can do this.
Yeah. I just want to interject that, I agree with you. I think all 4 of them are worthwhile reading, because they all bring something a little bit different to the table, no pun intended. But I would read them. What I want to interject is I would read them in chronological order. I feel like How Not to Die sets a lot of the stage for everything else and really gives you a sense of his attitude and where he's coming from, more so than any of these other books.
Just for everybody's awareness, where he's coming from, and he talks about this in each one of his books. Basically, his grandmother was dying of, I think it was diabetes, and she was actually able to reverse her condition by following a plant-based diet.
A whole foods plant-based diet.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But because something I feel like How Not to Die talks to meat eaters more than any of the other books. All of them do, because they're all arguing for the whole foods plant-based diet, right?
Yes.
But I feel like in the first book he very much empathizes with them a lot more, and I think that that's important. And he's kind of it's a beginning. It's no, it's okay, I know you're going to eat this stuff, but let's get you started down the road of, maybe you want to add this in, and here's why. And so I like that. It's a slow path that he takes, and it's been over years, that these books have come out. So that's why I just want to add that in, that I would also read them in chronological order.
Right, and I would add in not just meat eaters, but people who consume dairy and eggs as well. He's coming from the perspective of, if you eat these things, here's the evidence for what it's going to do to your body.
Right.
And if you just add in more health foods, then you might be able to counteract some of these negative effects. And obviously he goes the full distance that most doctors or nutritionists won't go, because they believe that people can't be trusted with this information because they just won't follow it.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to give up all of these tasty meats and dairies and cheeses and eggs when, society is centered around, American culture is centered around eating all of this unhealthy, delicious food.
Right.
But if we just have the full story available to us, if we have all of the evidence, then we are empowered to make that choice for ourselves. And that's really what he wants, is for people to learn and to make the right decisions.
Yeah.
And he's just giving you the tools to do so. And he's not saying, cut this out. He's saying, add berries in, add spinach in, add walnuts in.
Right. Which that's key. Not cut this out, add this.
Right.
Yeah.
With the hope that eventually you can build up your tolerance to these foods enough that you can just eventually give up all of the things that are harming you.
Yeah, well, he's hoping you see the results. Yeah, totally. So, now, I mean, I guess let me open this up a little bit. I want to dive into, hear from you more of, what you thought was really helpful info within it. I mean, we talked quite a bit. We talked for over a half hour already about it in the last episode of Sovereign Tech X that was released. Okay. Do you feel like this book, like, would you do any kind of ranking of the how-to books, or how not to, I guess I should call them the how not to books? Where would you rank this one?
I would say this is probably number 2.
What would number 1 be?
Number 1, How Not to Die.
Yeah.
Classic.
Yep.
You're definitely right. It's like the base of the pillar.
Yeah. All right, Usul. Nice. Well done.
Throwback.
Yeah.
So that is like the base of the pillar. It's building the foundation, really setting the stage for everything else.
Sure.
How Not to Age, I think, is taking the next logical step.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically saying, this is what is going to happen to you when you get to advanced age. And
right.
This is how you can make those outcomes even better.
Right.
How Not to Diet is 3rd place, I would say, because I think that some of the information in that book is redundant. And I don't want to make it sound like you don't have to read that book or you shouldn't read it. It's still very helpful when considering like all of the options that you have for dieting. But in my mind, if you read How Not to Die and How Not to Age, you don't really need that book.
Yeah.
Because then you already have all of the health advice that you need.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. And so you'd put Pandemic at 4?
Actually, that's a good point. I would put How to Survive a Pandemic at number 3 and How Not to Diet at 4. But I thought you were just asking about the How Not to
yeah,
series.
no, right. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, no, I get you. Yeah, I'd probably flip your 2 and 3. Like, I agree How Not to Die is the best. I'd put How to Survive a Pandemic at number 2.
Okay.
And basically because I feel like How Not to Die speaks to the individual, and then How to Survive a Pandemic talks about like, global, like the global ramifications of a lot of things.
Yeah, that's a good point. So like coming from a scientific background and also somebody who's been researching into the animal industry for a long time, I felt like, it was saying things that I had already known, but maybe there's people out there who don't already know these things. Then yes, absolutely, I agree with you. That book should be higher ranked.
Yeah. So, and then definitely How Not to Age and How Not to Diet is, I mean, it's still a great book. It is the weaker of the bunch, I would say, but that's not, that's like saying that, what's your favorite Star Wars movie,
Right, they're all pretty good.
Yeah, right. So, so that's just my ranking on it. Okay, so with this book, I mean, what were your big takeaways? I mean, obviously we got kind of your ranking, like, wow, no, this could be number 2, right under the first one. What were your big takeaways on this one?
So this one was really impressive, not just because of the sheer volume of reference material that Dr. Gregor included in it, which we talked about last time.
Yep.
Basically, he had to cut the book down by 75%, so it's a quarter of its original intended size, just because he needed to meet the publisher's expectations.
Right.
So there's a ton of information in here and a ton that was left out. And he gives you all of this reference info so you can do the research yourself. I kind of wish we got that full version of the book.
Same.
But we have this, and it's still a treasure.
Yeah.
My biggest takeaways, I think, were about how descriptive he became around advanced age illnesses. And especially how food can influence those outcomes throughout time. Maybe something specific would be that, like, a person who switches from a standard American diet at age 40 even over to a whole food plant-based diet can reduce the risk of like Alzheimer's and other chronic diseases like heart disease or diabetes by over 50%.
Right.
Whereas the younger you are when you make that transition, the higher that percentage goes. I also really loved that at the end of the book, he gave his summary, basically rounding up all of the advice throughout the book into these 8 main categories.
Yeah.
And he called it his How Not to Age 8.
It was Anti-Aging 8, was that
Anti-Aging 8.
Yeah. I love it. Yes. Yeah, you want to break them down?
Oh, I guess we could name a few of them. I don't
Sure.
want to give it all away.
Oh, yeah, they got to go buy the book. No, this isn't a sales pitch, folks. Don't worry. But, yeah, I mean, list off a couple.
Okay, I mean, so like I said, the cover gives away a few of them. Berries, nuts, and leafy greens are top 3. Absolutely. And that, I think, should be a given. Nuts I was kind of surprised to learn about. I know that they're a health food. I didn't realize they were that healthy of a food.
Right.
But apparently they are essential to healthy aging and just healthy survival.
Sure.
Berries, obviously tons of antioxidants, other phytonutrients. Same thing with leafy greens, tons of fiber.
Right.
Very important.
Right.
There were a couple other things that were not specifically food related, more a general diet, like protein restriction.
This one surprised me. Okay, I want to talk about that, but one quick thing I want to put in about the leafy greens.
Okay.
Like even some of the paleo people, when I used to really be into paleo, there are some bigger names in that. Like there's Marxists and and some others, but one of my favorites was Chris Kresser, who's really good. And he was a huge proponent of eating leafy greens. And he's like a paleo superstar. Definitely one of the biggest names there. So, it's just arguing for that in this book, like leafy greens is not just some kind of vegan vegetarian thing. Like it's a massive part of, say, of the paleo diet.
It should be a massive part of anyone's diet.
Well, precisely.
Where else are you going to get vitamin K?
Yeah, precisely.
And vitamin F, which is fiber.
Yeah. Obviously, the carnivores, well, they do what they do. So, but speaking of them, I guess the protein restriction thing. This surprised me. I mean, caloric restriction. Okay, sure.
That was the next one I was going to name.
Okay.
Caloric restriction is one of the anti-aging 8.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can mention that in a second, but are you willing to dive a little deeper into the protein restriction?
Yeah, we can talk about this. I know it was a big thing for you, and I was a little worried that you would be disappointed or that you would be unwilling to follow this advice because you are someone who really enjoys bodybuilding and almost as long as I've known you, taken some sort of protein supplementation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the thing. Even as of 4 days ago, like I saw 3 new studies that were basically talking about how, because the most common research and thus wisdom is, you have a gram of protein per pound of, body weight. Okay.
Yeah, I hear that all the time.
Yeah. So this was a meta-analysis of multiple studies, and they said, no, that's actually wrong. It should be like 1.62 grams.
Whoa.
Yeah. Like that it was way too low, what they had studied before. Now, I've brought this up in the past and this was years ago, we're talking 2-3 years ago, that the people, the best sports scientists would basically tell you that we don't know the upper limit of protein consumption. Like what is unhealthy, we actually don't know what that upper limit is. Okay. But now with these studies, and I need to dive deeper into them, like I haven't yet. Okay. But it's so new. are claiming that, oh, no. Yeah, there could be very much an upper limit, but we're also not touching it in the average American diet. Now, Dr. Greger is saying pretty much the exact opposite, to my understanding.
I kind of wonder, so how do amino acids play into this? Because
Right.
our body is able to construct proteins that we require from amino acids, which are the building blocks of all proteins. And frankly, from my understanding of Dr. Greger's work, eating raw protein as it is from animal sources, for example, actually presents your body with extra work because it has to break down those proteins into amino acids and then reconstruct them into the proteins your body actually needs.
Right.
So just eating raw amino acids from fruits and vegetables is something that makes it easier for your body to complete that process.
Right.
So I wonder if they took into account that factor in these studies. I'm not entirely sure. But
yeah, I'll have to look into it more, but continue, please.
So what Dr. Greger focuses on in that specific section of the Anti-Aging 8 with protein restriction, he goes into more detail about how you can achieve the same anti-aging results, not just by restricting all protein in general, but specifically methionine. And this is, for whatever reason, it causes more rapid aging in the studies that he was able to find on this. And I find it fascinating. Apparently, methionine is highly concentrated in dairy, eggs, and meat. No surprise there.
Sure.
So that's really what he's saying is the cause of advanced aging with higher protein intake.
So it's particularly methionine that is the issue, not so much... I mean, because there's different proteins, obviously, right? Like, so what... Break that down for me more.
Yeah, so methionine is an amino acid.
Right.
So it's part of a protein.
Yep.
And it's found in vast majority in animal proteins.
Yeah. So would the argument be then if you were taking in, like, say, brown rice protein or pea protein, that methionine wouldn't be an issue or wouldn't be as much of an issue?
It would be lower. I mean,
Okay.
obviously, all amino acids exist within plants, just in varying degrees. So it would still be there. It's just a matter of, it being a greater or lesser degree.
Okay. Yeah, that was... I mean, I'm kind of surprised. I feel like he left that until the end of the book. I mean, the whole anti-aging 8 thing, that's kind of like the last quarter of the book. But I felt like the protein conversation, I didn't recall that really coming up earlier on in the book.
Yeah, that's true.
Because I feel like that's a stunner. Like that would sell a book talking about that. I mean, because that's so antithetical to not just the American diet, but to, most diets around the world. I mean, like that rips on a lot of ancestral diets. And I'm not saying that Captain is not happy about this protein situation, but he's a cat. So
That's all he eats.
yeah, so it's a different story.
Captain!
He is ready to go. Okay, so again, this is something that really would sell a book. Like, why save it for such a smaller section at the end? I was really surprised by that.
Yeah, I wonder if he was kind of nervous about saying that, honestly, because there is so much advice out there for people to eat huge amounts of protein. And for some reason, the recommendations just keep going up.
Right. So, anyway, that one, like, I still want to deep dive on some of this newer research, I mean, I know Dr. Greger's up on the latest, all the time. And he does plenty of videos and everything else about it on social media. But now caloric restriction, this one's not a surprise because, and like I had mentioned in the previous episode, yeah, there's tons of research that caloric restriction, does help with, say, I mean, like telomeres and, so many different aspects of aging. and cellular decay, like preventing a lot of that. Okay.
Yeah, just by allowing your body to have time to clear out all the cellular junk.
Right.
Calorie restriction in primates to extend lifespan. Will it work? There's only one way to find out. There have been 4 investigations of calorie restriction and lifespan in non-human primates. The first was published in 2003. An analysis of the mortality of 117 rhesus monkeys followed for about 25 years in a lab, 8 of whom had their Purina monkey chow restricted. The average survival of the restricted monkeys was to 32 years of age, compared to 25 years for the control monkeys. However, it was more of an observational study since the monkeys weren't randomly assigned, and although in the abstract they talk about the survival advantage and how the ad libitum monkeys, eat-all-you-want monkeys, had more than twice the risk of death, but they acknowledged deeper into the paper that the difference in death did not reach statistical significance, meaning it may very well have been a fluke. That was all we had, though, until results started trickling in from the famous pair of studies that involved randomizing about 200 rhesus monkeys to caloric restriction or more normal diets, one out of the University of Wisconsin-Madison and another from the National Institute of Aging. The UW study reported a 30% calorie restriction significantly delayed disease and improved survival, but the NIA study did not. In the UW study, calorie restriction reduced the incidence of age-related diseases including cancer, cardiovascular disease, brain atrophy, and muscle wasting, preserving muscle mass, demonstrating calorie restriction can delay aging, but in the NIA study, the difference in age-related diseases did not achieve statistical significance. In the UW study, the restricted monkeys lived to an average of about 29 years, compared to the control monkeys, who lived closer to the average for monkeys in captivity of about 26 years old. In contrast, though one of the restricted monkeys in the NIA study became the longevity record holder for the species at age 43, on average, the restricted group didn't live any longer than the control animals. Why the disparate results between the two studies? In the NIA study that found no significant lifespan difference, the control group was not fed ad libitum, but rather had food portioned out to prevent excess weight gain. In contrast, in the UW study, the control monkeys could eat as much as they wanted throughout the day, so ended up weighing more than the NIA control animals. Of course, caloric restriction would improve the health and survival of overweight monkeys, just as weight loss would be beneficial for overweight people. But the null results in the NIA study suggest that normal weight people might not benefit from restricting further. The NIA monkeys were also fed a healthier diet. The diet in the UW study, where they saw significant benefit to cutting down, was an ultra-processed concoction of largely milk protein, corn oil, cornstarch, and table sugar, whereas the NIA diet actually included unprocessed plant foods such as corn, soybeans, and wheat, so it actually had some phytonutrients. About 29% of the UW diet was straight sugar, compared to 4% in the NIA diet. American adults get about 17 teaspoons of sugar a day, which is about 13% of calories. The contrasting findings suggest that the worse your diet is, the more important it is to eat less of it. The fourth study was on gray mouse lemurs, among the smallest of primates, standing just 3 inches tall. Those randomized with 30% caloric restriction compared to an ad libitum control group lived a whopping 50% longer, and not just average lifespan, but maximal lifespan. The maximum lifespan was boosted by about 20%. However, the calorie-restricted group still weighed heavier than their wild counterparts. So again, this may just be an illustration of the harms of obesity, and another indictment against all-you-can-eat buffets. Also, those in the calorie restriction group experienced an acceleration of age-related loss of gray matter throughout their brains, though this did not appear to translate into cognitive or behavioral differences. Pooling the 3 rhesus monkey studies together, there seemed to be a lower age-related mortality, but no significant difference in average lifespans overall between the caloric restriction groups and the control groups. Given the time and expense, there's little chance we're going to see any more long-term primate studies on caloric restriction for life extension. So what can we draw from the primate data to date? If you're overweight or living off junk food, eating less is a good idea.
It's another situation, and it's interesting that the conversation in the Anti-Aging 8 in this book, goes from protein restriction to caloric restriction, or maybe it's the other way around. Regardless, they're paired, okay? And it kind of makes sense. But I could see a lot of people reading that and going, oh, well, but then, I'm not going to be very strong, am I? But I don't think he's being like on the extreme side of caloric restriction. Because, yes, on the extreme side, like when you do heavy caloric restriction, sure, you might not age much, but like you also have almost no strength, and there's been a lot of research on this. But tell me more about what he was saying as far as caloric restriction.
Right. So he makes that point. He is very much aware that there is an extreme to caloric restriction where people are constantly hungry and they're suffering because of it. And that is the very definition of unsustainable dieting.
Right.
What he's talking about is a minor caloric restriction,
Right.
something on the order of even 200 calories a day reduced. And that is basically what you and I do on a daily basis.
Right.
Like, it's not so much that we don't eat the food that we require, because we absolutely do, and we're still able to go to the gym and be very healthy and active and energetic, but we only eat 2 meals a day. And we're not snacking in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what he's advocating for. And part of the explanation he has for that is, I guess you could liken it to like a candle that burns half as bright but twice as long. That's the metaphor that best describes it. And he's definitely not saying, like, become somebody who is anorexic.
Right.
He just is advocating for fewer snacks or fewer meals even.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to bring up, even like a lot of bodybuilders. Okay, yes, there's PEDs involved. No shit. Okay. But for a lot of bodybuilders, they will often, especially when they're quote unquote in season or, during show prep. But there are also plenty of bodybuilders who, say, not even professional bodybuilders, but people who just keep an exceptionally low body fat. They operate at a caloric deficit all the time, and so this idea of like, oh, I'm not getting enough of my calories and all this. I mean, to some degree, I think that's relative, depending upon the lifestyle that you're leading, I mean, you can look back, even in very short past 100 years of American history, right? And you can watch like old family films of the family on the farm, and it's insane what they're fucking eating, but none of them are overweight. and it's because, like just the lifestyle that they led allowed them to, to kind of burn through those calories. Now, that's not exactly the same thing we're talking about here with caloric restriction. But I think overall, yeah, I mean, we're not into like counting calories. Did you feel inspired to do that after reading How Not to Age?
No, honestly, I never feel the requirement to count calories.
Right.
Unless it's something that I know is unhealthy and we're eating it on purpose.
Yeah.
But what I do instead of counting calories for us is count servings. So serving sizes are more important than counting calories.
Right.
And so it's not really a big deal if we swap out almonds for cashews for walnuts.
Yeah.
As long as we get that serving of nuts in every day, we're golden.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I guess, I mean, maybe you just answered it, but how does caloric restriction come in?
So,
is it more about the intermittent fasting? Go ahead.
Yeah. So the first challenge with caloric restriction is you don't want to be malnourished.
Right.
And nourishment has a lot to do with the vitamins and minerals that you're getting in your diet. So, eating 2,000 calories a day of processed food is not going to give you the nourishment that you need.
Right.
You are basically depriving your body of things that it requires to continue maintaining its metabolism. So what we focus on first and foremost for caloric restriction is getting the best caloric and metabolic bang for our buck for every calorie that we eat.
Right.
Which to me is like high in antioxidants, high in phytonutrients, high in fiber. So foods that are very colorful, very leafy, things that have like known beneficial properties.
Yes.
So we try to cut down on flour as much as possible, sugar, anything refined, like that all goes first.
Right. So you're not counting calories, but you're making the calories count, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Got you.
Yeah. So that's the first point that I want to get across with caloric restriction is like, if you're eating fewer calories, you really do have to make sure that they're quality calories.
Right.
The next thing is the timing of those calories, which he does talk about briefly in one of the sections, time-restricted eating, which is what we do.
Yeah.
2 meals a day. It's actually more important than, even I realized up to this point. Like, I've already done the research for us. We've done this for a long time.
Yeah.
And we've had no problem maintaining body mass
Right.
as far as like building muscle, going to the gym,
Oh,
feeling
yeah.
energized. Like I'm not really having obsessive food thoughts except for like during my PMS time, but that's kind of different.
Sure.
That's not a surprise to me.
Right. Right.
But I think having that time-restricted feeding, in this book, it was made much more clear why it is important. And it has a lot to do with allowing your body that time to clear the cellular debris. Because when you eat, you're basically introducing this influx of all sorts of things from the outside world into your body. And even if you're eating like organic kale, for example, there's still going to be some amount of toxins, some amount of chemicals, some small amount of impurity that shouldn't be there is going to come into your body.
Sure.
And your body has to do work to flush that out. And so it's like utilizing proteins and enzymes, and it's doing all of this work, creating byproducts. And if you're just constantly eating throughout the day, then your body is constantly having to do all of this work to clear out those impurities or toxins or whatever it is.
Right.
And it doesn't really have the chance to take out the trash. So when you fast for over 12 hours, you're giving your body that time to really like clean itself out of those waste products. And that might be the biggest benefit of doing time-restricted feeding.
Okay. Yeah, I get that.
There are other benefits too, like you become less insulin resistant.
Sure.
And you have a greater regulation of your sleep cycle. So there's just a lot of reasons why it's a good thing to do.
Yeah.
What do we know about the effect of CR in the laboratory animals on the immune system?
Right. So it's a little bit complicated. So first of all, laboratory animals in the laboratory are kept in what's called a specific pathogen-free environment. So that doesn't mean there's no pathogens, but it's a relatively low pathogen environment where they are not obligated to really use their immune systems against all the challenges that we would face in the real world. So one question has come up. Are animals that are on calorie restriction immune compromised? And again, I think the data is a little bit mixed, but certainly there have been studies where people have done pathogen challenges on CR animals and they respond better. At least the old animals respond better than age-matched ad libitum fed control. So ad libitum just means eat as much as you want. But then for certain types of challenges, the caloric restriction clearly causes a deficit. So
yeah, the sepsis experiments are pretty clear.
Yeah.
With the CR animals compared to controls. When you induce sepsis in them, the CR animals die much more quickly.
Right. And so, of course, the obvious implication of that is that maybe CR would impair immune function in people and lead to higher risk of all sorts of infectious diseases. And this gets additionally complicated, though, by the question of, optimal CR with optimal nutrition. So sometimes you'll see this CRON, CRON, right? Caloric restriction with optimal nutrition, or CRAN, caloric restriction with adequate nutrition, right? So that can be done in a mouse, right? We can control all of that. So we make sure that they get all the micronutrients and vitamins that they need when they're on this CR diet. When you move into the real world and people start practicing caloric restriction, that all goes out the window, right? Like if I wanted to do caloric restriction off the top of my head, I wouldn't even know what to do to make sure that I'm getting optimal nutrition, right? And so in that state where you are CR without optimal nutrition, I think that's where I really become worried about the side effects, particularly as you raised immune deficits, because you may not be getting the nutrient value or the specific micronutrients and vitamins that you need to maintain a functioning immune system. Sure, you may affect some aspects of the biology of aging in a way that you're aging biologically more slowly. That doesn't matter if you get influenza and die, right? So again, I think that's an additional complication that comes into play. When we start talking about, we haven't talked about all the other, anti-aging nutritional strategies. When we start talking about recommending those nutritional strategies to the general public based solely on mouse studies, I get really concerned because of this environmental complexity that humans live in. And we haven't even talked about the genetic complexity, right? So there's all sorts of things that are just different about laboratory animals compared to people living in the real world.
And then what can we say about frailty, sarcopenia, as it changes in an animal in a CR environment, and can that be extrapolated also?
Yeah. So I think it's pretty clear, I think, that much like rapamycin, most functional measures of aging seem to be preserved in calorically restricted animals, including measures of frailty and measures of sarcopenia. And the same thing again is true with rapamycin. This actually surprised a lot of people when the first studies were done, because the expectation was, because mTOR plays such a big role in muscle synthesis, that if you inhibit mTOR with rapamycin or caloric restriction, which is a potent inhibitor of mTOR, that you would actually see accelerated sarcopenia. And that just isn't the observation in laboratory animals. Again, we have to be careful not to extrapolate to people, but it doesn't seem to be the case that you lose muscle mass and function in the way that people would define sarcopenia. I think the important complication here is that all of the caloric restriction studies that I'm aware of, when they look at muscle function, normalize the body weight. Yeah. And the calorically restricted mice weigh substantially less than the ad libitum fed mice. Usually, I think it's on the order of 35% less. So
it's usually grip strength normalized to weight.
Right. So what you're actually seeing is that the calorically restricted mice have maintained muscle function proportionate to their body weight. Yep. And I don't know the answer to this, but it's something that I thought of when we were talking about this show, is let's just say you did that in a person, right? So you would be able to answer this, I'm sure. You've got a 60-year-old person, who needs to lose 30% of their body weight. But of course you want to maintain their muscle mass, right? Their muscle function. Would you view it as a good thing or a bad thing if they lost 30% of their body weight
and 30% of their
30%
muscle.
of their strength?
No, I don't think we would, and I don't think we would view it as a good thing if that, because again, if you're telling me that someone needs to lose 30% of their body weight, presumably their body composition isn't great to begin with.
Yeah.
So no, I think you would view that as maybe a better thing than where they started, but not optimal either.
Yeah.
Right. Optimal might be you would lose 30% of your body weight, but it would disproportionately be adipose tissue, and you might only lose 10% of your strength or none at all.
Right. So again, this is
depending on the change in lean body mass.
Yeah, this is just a complication of the CR studies. And again, even it's hard for me sometimes. It takes me, 20, 30 minutes of trying to dig through the paper to really figure out, what normalization did they do to look at metabolic rate or muscle mass or lean mass or fat mass or muscle function, right? But usually these studies will be normalized to body weight. This actually comes up also in some of the intermittent fasting studies where, the question sometimes in these studies is, are they isocaloric or are they calorically restricted when they're put on intermittent fasting? And people will claim they're isocaloric, but the mice lose weight. And what they really are is isocaloric when normalized to body weight, right? So, they're really calorically restricted, but you have to kind of dig to get how the normalizations were done to really understand.
Now, when we think about what we know in humans, there was a study that looked at the difference in bone mineral density in people who underwent equal amounts of weight loss, one driven by a caloric restriction strategy, one driven by an exercise-driven strategy. And the exercise-driven weight loss group did not experience a reduction in BMD, but the CR group did.
Yeah.
So, that's interesting. That's yet another thing that makes you think there's a little more nuance to this, which is not to say CR from a weight loss perspective isn't valuable, but it begs the question, is CR the right tool for longevity? Once you've achieved optimal weight, is additional CR beneficial?
Well, that makes the assumption we know what optimal weight is. I think that's kind of the crux of the question, right? We're asking, does CR impact longevity positively? We know if you go on CR, you're going to lose weight. So if the answer to that is yes, then by definition, optimal weight is lower than what we think, right?
Well,
so,
in humans though, right? Yeah,
I know, but we don't.
we don't
I
know.
would say we still don't really know what optimal weight is. So again, this I think just reflects the challenges in coming to definitive answers. And I think maybe the way I think about it more so is, what are the what are the downsides potentially to caloric restriction? And if we don't know that caloric restriction has big benefits in terms of health span and perhaps lifespan, what are the downsides, and do those downsides outweigh the uncertainty we have about whether caloric restriction is beneficial? And unfortunately, I think this is something that not very many people in this field pay attention to, right? People are, we all expect if you do a clinical trial of a drug, you're going to report adverse events and you're going to look at side effects. Very rarely do people think about that before they write a book recommending that people should do diet X, right? Even in the clinical trials, some of the nutritional clinical trials, they don't really carefully monitor adverse events. And I think it's just, again, it's a bias in the way we think about interventions. We feel like nutritional interventions are by their very nature safe. And I think, certainly for extreme nutritional interventions, that's clearly not true. So I think we should be thinking about what are the risks associated with significant caloric restriction in people as a therapeutic strategy.
Okay, so, I want to ask you this, because I know you didn't want to go down all 8 of the anti-aging 8. Unless there's another one you want to get in, what would you say, was there something you read in this where you said, okay, no, we're going to make this change? Like, was there a big one that hit? If you need a second to think about it, I can mention a couple things that I really dug.
Yeah, was there something for you?
Yeah. One thing I thought that was fascinating was about getting your hearing back. that was kind of insane.
Really? Eliminating tinnitus, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. And not that I have that issue, but it actually speaks to an overall point that I think is really key. And I feel like most people know this, but for some reason, no one ever really buys it, or no one ever really implements it. And that is, he kept making the point of, no, start this right now. It doesn't matter how old you are. Sure, it's better if you do it when you're 40 or earlier, but even if you're in your 50s or 60s, no, go ahead, start now. And you're going to be reversing, negative processes or, negative effects that have been going on for your whole life due to your diet or whatever else. And that was really valuable to hear, is that these, the effects of the American diet or even the standard American way of life, these things really can be reversed, and there's evidence for that, you know. So overall, like I really liked hearing that message. I think that's important, you know, to get out there, because that's one of the big things for a lot of people. I think when they think about, oh yeah, boy, I should have started lifting weights when I was 20, or I should have started, you know, whatever, when I was 30, and I'd be in better shape right now. And it's like, nah, yeah, don't ever fall for that fallacy. Like, all this stuff can be started at any point, and
it's never too late.
It's never ever too late, you know, to turn things around. And it was just amazing so many times throughout this book what he was talking about is like, no, this will reverse the effects, you know, or the aging effects of whatever it happened to be he was discussing at the time. So I really like that. But it was there, again, to your point, was there like a major shift that we made that I wasn't even aware of based upon you reading this?
So when you said that, I kind of had three thoughts simultaneously.
Yeah, sure.
One of them is not necessarily a change that we would make. It was just something that I learned that I thought was like really fascinating, because it kind of disproves some of the research that has happened around Alzheimer's in the past.
Okay.
And you and I talked about this briefly, but he says that there is a lot of emerging research in the Alzheimer's community now that shows that the amyloid fibers that are found in Alzheimer's brains, that is not actually like proven to be a direct cause of Alzheimer's.
Oh yeah,
and
this
even
is huge.
there are some people who don't have Alzheimer's who have that amyloid fiber buildup.
Yeah.
So it's not a guarantee that like this is what's causing it. Maybe it's a reaction to whatever is actually causing the Alzheimer's, but it's not. Anyway, that was just fascinating to me. Was
Agreed.
that like
Yeah.
the amyloid fibers? That's not a tell.
Yeah. That stunned me as well.
Yeah.
ahead.
So then the next two things are things that I have made changes in, or at least I have encouraged you to make changes in. Whether you take that advice or not is up to you. You probably know where I'm going with this. One of the pieces of advice Dr. Greger gives in this book has to do with how not to show signs of aging visibly. And obviously the largest part of visibly aging has to do with the way your skin looks.
Sure. Yeah.
So what he recommends is to put lotion on your skin.
Oh, yes.
And this is something that I've been told ever since I was a teenager, and I never like really understood why, but I kind of intrinsically understood. Putting lotion on your skin after you get out of the shower, it kind of locks in that moisture and protects your skin from being dry. But apparently it also reduces like overall levels of inflammation in your body, because that dryness can cause irritation, can cause micro tears. And putting lotion on your skin helps to prevent that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's just one thing that he recommends that I also passed on to you as a recommendation.
Yes. Yeah, I just have to figure out how to implement it, because, okay, it's one thing to put lotion on your hands. It's one thing to put lotion on your feet, which I do both of those very often, actually. But, like, I'm a hairy Hebrew, and, you get, like, that kind of lotion all over you, and, I mean, you're just sticky for a while. And
you got to find the right lotion.
Well, that's it. That's really all I need to do is find the right lotion. I'm like, okay, what is lotion for hairy people, and that's, yeah, so I'm all for putting that in, and I don't not believe him. I do believe what he's saying. But that's something I do have to implement yet. So, all right, what was there a third one?
Yeah. Okay. So the third one is something that I've already started implementing.
Wait. Well, before I go further, you have already been lotioning yourself forever, like you said.
Yes, I do that every time I get out of the shower.
Yeah, it's amazing
Lotion
to
my
watch.
whole body.
I mean, it's great.
Sometimes you help me.
Yes. Yes, I do. Yeah. So, and I'll just say, like, I mean, genetics are always a factor, sure, but you look amazing, and multiple people comment how, you still look like you're 20 or even younger than that. So I think lotioning is helping out.
Thank you, Cabana Boy.
Yeah. Sorry. So please continue with number 3. I apologize for the interruption, though I'm sure the listeners are more than happy about it.
So the third one, I don't know. This might only be relevant to women, maybe some men out there.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like so much of the skincare products in the beauty industry are like incredibly overpriced, and there's so much advertising that goes into it that
Sure.
like, how are you supposed to know what to believe
Sure.
about what is actually beneficial for your skin and what's not?
Right.
So as far as the body lotion goes, he just says something that has an emollient in it, which could be just about anything, as long as you get a lotion that doesn't have alcohol in it. So that's like general body lotion.
Yeah.
This specifically that I'm talking about now is for face lotion,
Okay.
or face serums. Huge profitable market in the beauty industry is face serums and
Right.
face lotions and night creams and day creams and everything in between.
Yeah.
And I have always stayed away from that section of the store when I go into like the beauty product section, because it's just overwhelming. There's too many. And
Yeah.
how do you choose? Especially when the bottles are sometimes like $50 or $100 each.
Oh, yeah.
So I've always just kind of like put raw oil on my face, or something like hyaluronic acid. Dr. Greger actually talks about this. Because it's it's an aspect of aging, is like how your face ages. So what he recommends in this book is surprisingly hyaluronic acid, vitamin C, and retinol. These 3 things are actually genuinely beneficial to skin, and there's evidence for this, and it's not just marketing.
Right.
But there are different types of retinol. Some are stronger than others. And some people have sensitive skin. Like retinol in the sunshine might actually irritate your skin.
Right.
Also, vitamin C, ascorbic acid, as it's called, that has a relatively short shelf life. So it's not stable for the long term in some preparations. You just want to make sure you're getting a preparation that is actually stable. And he recommends just buying like raw 100% ascorbic acid and putting it on your face that way. But yeah, that's
Okay.
what I learned, and that's what I've implemented so far. And it's only been a few weeks, so I can't really say for sure, like, yeah, it's doing better than my previous skincare routine. It might take a few months for me to notice results, if any. But yeah, that's that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of surprised he didn't just say, it's like, yeah, put cum on your face. I mean, and I mean that literally. Like, ancient Egyptians did that, and there's actually research, done now that shows, oh yeah, no, this is actually a great skin cream. I'm not joking.
Does it have retinol?
I couldn't tell you.
Does it have vitamin C?
Yeah. Depends on what you eat. What you eat does have effect on cum, but anyway, yeah, I didn't mean that to come off as crass. I meant that quite literally. That that's a very ancient skin cream.
Well, I think it's similar in consistency to hyaluronic acid, actually.
Right.
Because it's a humectant. It absorbs and traps moisture.
I think we need to do research on this.
We should do our own experiments.
Yes, for science. Okay. That works.
Just rub it into my cheeks before going into work.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Hey, yeah, it's got to be fresh.
Your skin is glowing today, Ellen. What do you have?
I love it. Okay, yes. So we'll do this, and we'll report back to the listeners, and we'll let them know how it goes. But this is the thing. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he said it, because a lot of this, and I want to get on to the questions. But a lot of this book, he talks about sex. Like, there's a whole section on sex, and he's basically saying, don't fucking stop having it. Like, keep going, like one of the sure signs of, what did he call it? ED stands for early death.
Exactly.
And which I thought was great. And he was, basically saying, like, yeah, you stop fucking, like, this is one of the, telltale signs that you're on your way out the door, And wow, Captain is really, he's really being disturbing in the studio. But anyway, let's get into some of the questions. So again, this comes out of the Discord channel, and it was really all in response. I don't think we said anything that we've recorded or, that we've talked about in this recording that necessarily responds to these questions.
Okay.
But they are in response to the previous Sovereign Tech X episode that we did when we were talking about this very thing, talking about the plant-based diet, talking about, Dr. Greger's work. So here we go. I'm going to read it, and you can get in your responses on this, Ellen. So this is, I know he won't mind if I mention him. So this is coming from Sek of the Agora podcast, of course. He said, couple of responses. It is my understanding that there is no study comparing a diet that eats healthy, clean meat mixed with other things like free-range, local organic meat not pumped full of garbage in factory farms versus a plant-based diet. Are you all aware of such a study? Like, yeah, of course, whole food plant-based is going to be better for you than eating at McDonald's. Now, I want to get into another response. We'll say this is from JR. From everything I've seen, that study doesn't exist. They're all epidemiological studies that don't account for food quality. Edit by all, I only mean those are all the studies I'm aware of and are the ones that tend to get press. I don't mean to totally exclude the possibility of other types of well-run studies. So do you have any comment on that?
So, short answer, no. I think some of the studies that Dr. Greger mentions will call out what kind of food it is and how it's prepared, not necessarily where it is sourced from.
Right.
So that is a big question mark. Obviously, we don't have an answer to that unless we were to go through and read each of the studies, and there's no guarantee that they would actually call out like which farm this cow or chicken came from.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair point to bring up. I kind of want to say the only place you could really get away, or that you could, I think, try and pull that off more would be like New Zealand, where actually grass-fed, organic meats are the norm, because in a large swath of the rest of the world, it's the opposite, right? It's all, it's all factory farm bullshit, as to where there, McDonald's type meats are not common. So,
well, so I want to say some of these studies, I do recall him saying it was food that was bought at a local grocery store. So it could be something like our local Hannaford,
yeah.
where we pick up the food from.
Yeah, right.
And those are factory farmed. It's not McDonald's level, but it's, also not organic grass fed.
Right.
But I do want to say I don't know how much that matters. I mean, none of us really do, right? If the study doesn't exist. But I think that a lot of the benefits of whole food plant-based diets have to do with the fiber content, with the phytochemical content, with the antioxidants, and not necessarily something that meat inherently has. What meat does inherently have is high amounts of saturated fat and cholesterol, and that is not something that plants contain, no matter what plant it is, except maybe coconuts.
Right. Yeah, okay. So let's move on to the next one here. This is also from Sek. He said, and also, soy and corn are certainly big businesses. I don't know if they've surpassed the meat, dairy, and sugar lobbies, but soy and corn is a high-dollar industry. So it's not as simple as, quote, studies funded by evil cattle industry versus, oh yeah, totally for real evidence-based studies that have total integrity, end quote. Science is always for sale. Everyone on all sides can make studies say whatever they want them to. So no, broccoli doesn't have paid studies, but that is a red herring. That is ignoring the huge businesses that do and have incentives to pay for studies that support plant-based diets. Do you have a response to that?
Yeah, I do. I see the
Sek
look
can
on
take
your
it, don't worry.
Okay. Well, I want to word this carefully. So, in general, the studies that Dr. Greger uses aren't saying overall a whole food plant-based diet is better. Some of those do exist, yes, but the majority of studies that he references compare one food to another directly. So I guess I should correct what I was saying before. Like, yeah, for like the protein restriction diet, for example, there's a wide variety of foods they tested.
Sure.
That's true.
Sure.
But there are a lot of studies that also exist that compare like just eating corn to just eating beef, for example. I don't know exactly specifically what study that is, but it's just an example, like just eating grapes versus just eating a hamburger, you know?
Right.
Like, it's a comparison of one food to another. And like, you could say, okay, a hamburger is it's a multi-food product. It's not just one thing, but
right.
I hope you're getting what I'm saying. It's just like a direct comparison, not necessarily saying overall this diet, which is comprised of whole food plant-based diet, of whole foods plants, is better than a meat eater diet.
Right.
So I just wanted to specify that first. And yes, there are a lot of lobbies out there for soy that will do that.
Yeah.
And corn.
Yeah, corn's huge. Yeah.
Yep.
Especially in America. Yeah.
Yeah, but I also want to point out that the companies that in vast majority own those products, like Monsanto or Morningstar or name your giant food corp, they are also playing both sides in the sense that they profit whether you eat plant-based or animal-based.
Yeah. I mean, that's an important thing. Like, a lot of these companies are massive. Like the same company that makes plant-based chicken nuggets or whatever, you know, that or that makes a vegan chicken nugget probably also makes real chicken nuggets, you know? Like I mean, they're literally playing both sides.
Morningstar, like I just named.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
They're owned by Monsanto.
Yeah. So, you know, like what does that say? You know, ultimately,
it just says that they're like taking advantage of whatever niche in the market they see opening up. And they don't really care what you're eating, whether it's plant-based or animal-based. They just want you to eat their product.
Yeah. I mean, I think a big part of this, you know, because so JR makes a comment. I want to read this quick. It says, also, it should be noted that, quote, also, it should be noted that while it's good to know where funding comes from, that doesn't necessarily imply something nefarious is going on, end quote. And that's fair. Okay. I think a big part of this, and it's particular when you brought up Monsanto, I mean, I do think kind of a big part of this as well is there is protection and increasing value of intellectual property. Because Monsanto, like, you know, trademarks and registers and copyrights and, you know, IPs the fuck out of everything that they make and do. Oh, it's so insane.
Yeah, they try to hold intellectual property that is literally genetic material, like canola seeds, for example.
Right.
You cannot expect to control a genetic code. It's going to escape.
But they want
it's going to get out. But yes, they use whatever legal might that they have with their billions of dollars of funding, and will like squash any farmers that say like, no, we didn't mean to grow your canola in our fields. We swear it was an accident. Like, your truck drove by and dropped some seeds, and like then it cross-pollinated with our field. Like, it just, you know, these things happen. But Monsanto is one of those companies that just wants to own everything. And when this first started, I think it was the 90s, when companies were first allowed to copyright species of plants, like literally genetic material, Monsanto was just buying up as much as they could.
Oh yeah. Oh, I mean, they tried to they tried to slap IP on the human genome. I mean, they really tried, you know, and this is something that people can look into, you know. I mean, imagine that, like, you don't even own, like, basically under U.S. law, and sure they're doing it everywhere else. So you could basically say under global law, like, you don't even own your body. Monsanto does. Because why? Because they hold the fucking IP on it. I mean, that's insane.
Right.
Fortunately, that got thrown out. But, you know, I mean, I bring up the IP thing because I think to understand, it's not just a matter of health. It's not just a matter of, yeah, okay, nobody, broccoli's not getting funded by Big Broccoli or whatever, because it's not there. It's not just that. It's also the fact that a lot of this isn't even about like health and not caring about health or trying to poison people with horrible food and all this stuff. A lot of this simply comes down to IP law, and that creates, in my opinion, a very different perspective. I get it that, okay, it might not be nefarious. Like the studies could be perfectly legit and, they want the study to, because they believe in their product, right? Whatever that happens to be. Like they think their food is that good and that healthy and yay, we added vitamin C to it or something like that. Like that's entirely possible. But at the back end of a lot of this is we need to take actions to protect our intellectual property. And that always bothers me, that's always in the background of anything being done. So anyway, do you have other comments on this, or I can read more of the questions?
Yeah. Did you have something else?
No, I mean, that's what I've got in response to a lot of what they said. Okay, let's see. Sex says, by the way, I am not necessarily arguing for the other side there. This is just skepticism. However, sure, I do tend to think that some quality and clean meat is healthy, can be ethical and symbiotic, and possibly more environmentally sound than, say, soy, corn, legumes, at least currently. These are certainly my current thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone over this before, but I think we're all in agreement that current farming practices, whether it's plants or animals, are unethical, are not good for the environment, and are not good for the plants themselves.
Right.
I don't think it's healthy for the majority of plants in the U.S. that are farmed to be corn and soy.
Yeah.
That's not good for the soil. That's not good for animals. That's not good for people.
Right.
That's not good for anybody, because what the planet evolved with for millions of years was this huge variety of biodiverse species of every, I think you and I talked about this before, like in How Not to Age, Dr. Greger mentions there's this challenge of like eating 50 different foods a week.
Yeah.
50 different fruits and vegetables, I should say. And you said like, I think that would be easier to do today than it would be like 200 years ago. And I'm like, really? I would assume the opposite, because like today, when you go to the grocery store, you only see maybe 2 or 3 varieties of tomatoes or apples or corn or mushrooms, whatever the case may be. But like hundreds of years ago, before IP, before people started really picking up on this industrialized farming, you just ate what was growing outside.
Yeah.
There's clover, there's flowers, there's all sorts of wild type grains and leaves of every kind of tree, like fruits and nuts abounding. It's just like what we see at the grocery store today is such a sad small sample of the true variety that exists in the natural world, or that should exist before people industrialized and really started like honing in on a few select species and making those species as fruitful as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, this, to me, this kind of gets back to the IP thing, and to the point that maybe it's not even necessarily nefarious, as in, it's not nefarious in that they're trying to poison you. It's not nefarious in that, like they want to make bad food or something. No, they just want to promote their fucking IP. You know, like that. Man, I mean, like I remember years ago reading Stephan Kinsella's books, on intellectual property, and reading through those, and I'm just like, these are some of the most important books ever fucking written. Like, I don't agree with Stephan Kinsella on a million things, I'm sure. Okay. But like getting rid of IP law would just open up so much. Like if somebody said to me, okay, what's the first part of government you get rid of? Okay, sure. Military would probably be at the top of the list, but right next to it would be IP law. Kill that. End it. Because it's poisoning that is what's poisoning almost every aspect of humanity. Poisoning in the sense that it's holding it back. Not only as far as diet goes, but also creatively, artistically, which is at the very heart of our need for art is as strong, in my opinion, as any of our needs for food. And yeah, get rid of that. I mean, that's such a, you want to know where the funding's coming from, and Dr. Gregor's totally right on, to point that out. I'd love to see him take a stance on IP and say like, like a big reason that a lot of this food gets promoted and all that, ultimately comes down to, protecting a lot of vested interests, and yeah, there's the profit motive for sure. But a big part of that profit motive is, again, being able to go to court and saying, no, I get to make these tomatoes, you don't, or not tomatoes, whatever it happens to be. It's a huge deal. Any thoughts on that, Ellen?
Yeah, I have a ton of thoughts, and we could spend a lot of time on this.
Yeah.
I think for the interest of getting through the show, we should carry on.
Yes.
Maybe we can focus in on it more on a next episode.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. Maybe people have questions on it. Feel free to ask it, and we can get to them in another episode. But yeah, to keep this from becoming another 3-hour opus, why don't we move on to the next subject? In fact, let's move right. Great segue. Let's move right into talking about art.
Okay.
Do we want to do, because we teased this in the last released episode, do we want to talk about Jedi versus Sith, or do we want to just get into the real evil of Salem's Lot?
Oh, okay. I think that we should talk about the Jedi versus Sith conversation. I know this is like a hard transition, but
yeah,
I think that your listeners deserve to hear this.
Okay.
And it's something that I feel like you're very passionate about. We need to ask these questions.
Okay. All right. We'll get into it. We'll get into the problems here. Okay. And we'll see. Maybe we might even, just for the interest of time, we might even save Salem's Lot. We'll see. Okay. But maybe we can get into it. I'll try and
How about we just go?
All right. We're just going to go. I'll try and be brief. Okay. So I actually saw a funny video on Instagram the other day. And I mean like 2-3 days ago, where it's totally unrelated to Star Wars, but it got turned into a Star Wars thing, because just about anything can be. And it's this guy with his son, and they're like window shopping, in like looking in the window. This is clearly in Britain or Europe or somewhere there. And this priest walks out and just sees the little boy and runs and grabs the little boy away from the dad, away from the father. And the caption at the top of the video is, when a Jedi sees a Force-sensitive kid. But the priest just kidnapped the kid. Now, I'm guessing that was like from some comedy show, and they're probably making fun of Catholic priests taking little boys, and, yikes. Okay. But it was spot on, and it was so funny, because this is one of the big initial things. So yes, Jedi, depending upon which era of Star Wars we're essentially talking about, Jedi basically kidnap children. Like, they take them away if they find out that they're Force sensitive.
Yeah,
okay.
in the case of Anakin, he wasn't kidnapped. His
he's
family
rescued.
knew what was going on.
Yeah, it's true. So there's a couple things I need to make plain here in the onset. Okay. One, the Jedi are, and you can tell me, Ellen, you're kind of outside looking in to some degree. You've become very familiar with Star Wars. I don't think that's unfair.
Yeah, that's true. I've been watching it for as long as we've been together.
Sure, right. But, so would you say that the Jedi are presented as the heroes of the story?
I think it depends on what Star Wars you're watching. But in the majority of cases, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I think the Jedi are generally, like, and I think even in George Lucas's own mind, like, to him, the Jedi are the great ideal. You even have like Obi-Wan Kenobi, who in multiple films talks about being civilized, you know, like, oh, blasters, so uncivilized, you know. And so they're kind of considered the epitome, it would seem, of human potential.
They're pretty terrifying. They can take on entire armies by themselves.
Sure, fair. Yeah. So, but so they're seen as they are the good guys. You know, we could get into arguments about like, oh, are the rebels actually terrorists? Is the Empire actually the bad guys in the galaxy or not? You know, you could get into all of these kinds of debates, but regardless, I think for most people, to the point that in the very real world, you have people who there's a thing called Jediism, because so many people in countries like Australia and the United Kingdom listed off when they were filling out their whatever, you know, whatever census they take, whatever that happens to be, you know, they will fill out under religion Jediism, because there's so many people, and you can look this up. You can go online, you can read about it, and it'll say Jedi, you know, like, what is Jediism? And it's all these people talking about how they consider the Jedi, like, okay, yeah, it's not real, but it upholds our highest human ideals. And for me, this is where this whole problem comes up, and why I will often digress, or will often not digress, but we'll often go down a path of, oh, the fucking Jedi suck. You know, I'll this is where this argument comes from, because there are so many people out there who, and look, I'm sure these real world people who think they're Jedi or whatever are very nice people. You know, like I'm not going to say that they're necessarily bad people. All right. But you know, they're making this argument around a fictional universe, and within the fictional universe itself, in my opinion, it's abundantly clear that no, these are not great people. Okay, that being the Jedi. Now, second point that I want to make quickly, okay, is just like any other long-running franchise, particularly within science fiction, but really any franchise, you have a lot of different writers, right? Like, you have different writers, different directors, different production teams. You have people that come from different backgrounds with different ideas. Okay, even Star Trek. Like, in Star Trek, you know, Ellen, I mean, you're a huge Star Trek fan.
Yeah.
What is the Federation's stance on money?
They don't really use it.
They don't use it, like, it's... Do you recall, like, say, Picard's quote from Star Trek First Contact?
That it's primitive, that it's something that they left behind.
Yes, they left it behind, exactly. But then you watch Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and wait a minute, I'm pretty sure Dax is laying out some gold-pressed latinum. Where the fuck did she get that? She's Federation. Like, there's no, you know, she's Starfleet. What money do they have? You know, or you watch the original series, and they constantly talk about getting paid. And this is my point, is you have different writers, people with different fucking ideas, you know, and different ways that they want to do things. So there isn't like a unified, I mean, Star Wars for a little while kind of had a certain like unified canon under George Lucas, but in general, you have a lot of different writers with that bring a lot of different ideas. And for Star Wars, for a very long time, you had so many writers, you know, before Disney took it over, you had so many writers who in some ways were doing whatever the hell they wanted and writing whatever they wanted and putting on the page whatever they wanted. And sometimes that stuff was good, like Timothy Zahn. Sometimes that stuff was shit. Okay. So, and with Disney, I mean, Disney has changed the way all of this stuff works with, particularly with the Star Wars Ahsoka, with the recent Ahsoka show, which you watched, Ellen. Mm-hmm. In that, one of the most controversial things to come out of that is that apparently anybody can learn to use the Force. Anyone. You know, like, yeah, Ahsoka says talent is a factor, but Sabine Wren doesn't have Force abilities, or she didn't anyway, but apparently, oh no, all you got to do is learn. It's like karate. And I know that's directly coming from George Lucas's mouth, where he eventually said, oh, it's like karate. And so anybody can learn it as long as they devote enough time. Now, I think that's nonsense. But this is the point, is that really within Star Wars, like all of these rules change all the time, and all it takes is one new person making a new movie that Disney gave them the green light to do, and they're going to change how the Force works, to quote Han Solo. Or, well, he said that's not how the Force works, but they could change how the Force works in 2 hours, right? So I just want to be sensitive and lay all of this out first to suggest, okay, wait, why is this a problem? And then also understand that this stuff changes all the time. Like the idea that the Jedi like kidnap children has probably been debunked at this point by Star Wars. I mean, maybe not. By Disney is what I mean, not by Star Wars, but by Disney, under Disney's ownership, say, of Star Wars. So everything, all the problems I'm going to very quickly try and lay out. The problems I'm going to lay out, these could be contradicted, and Disney can come out and say, oh, no, that's not true anymore, and they'll do that tomorrow. Okay. And so in ways, does it really matter? No. But ultimately, what we do have and what does get presented as canon within, at least by Disney's, metric, I'm not even going to get into the old expanded universe, which is far superior in my opinion, but under Disney's tutelage, there's still plenty of problems, and these are certainly not the heroes, nor are they the highest ideals of human evolution and things like this. Okay. So very quickly, I think the best thing to really start off with is just to read the different creeds that have been more or less considered canon, or have been put in canon works, even under Disney, between the Jedi and the Sith. Okay, so there's the Jedi Code and the Sith Code, and they are believed to be opposites and whatever. Okay, fine. So I'm going to read the Jedi Code. Okay, here we go. There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force. Okay, so you hear that. Ellen, you want to give me some quick thoughts?
Yeah, it's confusing.
Well, I'll say, yeah. Go ahead.
The saying that like there is no emotion, there is serenity. Is that what it was?
Yeah, there is no passion, there is serenity. There is no emotion, there is peace. That's what it says at the beginning. Which, what is that even saying?
I mean, that also sounds like a recipe for disaster, just straight up by saying that people's emotions aren't real.
Right. Yeah, and that disaster is Darth Vader. But yeah, continue. Yeah.
Right. It just sounds like these are things that people are trying to convince themselves of, and it seems like a creed of denial, of cutting yourself off from a lot of these inherent human needs, desires, traits, behaviors. It feels very unnatural and stilted, and I think it's going to create a lot of hypocrites.
Sure. Sounds very Buddhist, doesn't it?
In some ways.
Yeah.
I suppose.
Yeah. So we could do a little bit more of a breakdown on that, but I'm going to read the Sith Code now, and then I want to hear what you think about that. Okay. Peace is a lie. There is only passion. Through passion, I gain strength. Through strength, I gain power. Through power, I gain victory. Through victory, my chains are broken. The Force shall free me. So when you hear that, what do you think?
It sounds fun.
Right? Exactly. Like, who wrote this and said, boy, that sounds terrible? Right?
Yeah.
It's like, let's see. So the last part of it is the Force shall free me? Well, fucking yeah. One sounds like it's denying the individual right, and the other sounds like it's empowering it. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, it sounds like the Jedi Code's ideal was just dying and being one with the Force.
Yep.
And for the Sith, it was being free and being alive.
Yes. Yeah, giving into your passion, right? Feeling those emotions. I mean, it's talking about, I gain strength. Through strength, I gain power and all of this. And I mean, is there something more you want to share on that?
If it was just talking about personal power, I think that would be great. It'd be wonderful.
Yeah.
But as we know in Star Wars, that's not what they intend.
Well, that's the big question is, so with the Sith code, and again, this is where we run into the problem that I discussed, is that you have a million different authors or writers, directors, whatever, with a million different ideas of what exactly, that really means. Okay. Because in a very real sense, what we know of the Sith, they're totally individualistic, right? I mean, even in the action, which people could bristle at, and I would say even rightfully so, of you have to kill your master to become the master. Like, that is a matter of individuality. That is not a matter of being unified, right? Like the Sith, the argument would be the Sith's whole problem was, and the reason that they created the rule of two, though even this has changed because of Disney, but we won't go into that. The reason they created the rule of two is because when there were a bunch of Sith Lords, they were, they all wanted to be top dog, that they just killed, they were like offing each other all the time. Okay. So, but that, yes, I mean, that's a desire for, perhaps wanting some kind of greater power or whatever, but it's still about really ultimately a personal power. It's about a, enlightened self-interest.
If you're talking about killing your master metaphorically, then yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's literal, and sure, that gets into, obviously I'm not one for killing. Okay. But the ultimate point that I'm bringing up is, like, the Jedi code is a fucking mess. The Jedi, like this is a, like you said, this is going to create people who are confused, hypocritical, and like they're denying themselves nonstop, and trying to live for some kind of collective good, whatever that even means. I mean, the very concept of a collective good is, I would argue, a problem in and of itself. And I mean, under Disney's tenure, it's only gotten worse because, like, now apparently when the Jedi were at their best, like, the phrase they keep saying to themselves is "for the Republic." Like, what? like you're the highest aspect of human evolution, and you exist to just prop up like a fucking government?
Yeah,
what
this
is that?
was even explored in Star Wars too.
Sure.
They're called the Pawns of the Republic.
Yeah, right. I mean, like, there's nothing good about that. Now, it's good if you're the kind of person who's like, oh yeah, democracy's great, and yay voting, and and a lot of these very conventional, concepts of what people need perhaps to somehow survive. In that sense, okay, maybe I could see where you feel that way. But, like, there is no emotion, there is peace. Fuck you. Like, yes, there is emotion, and it's a good thing. It's a wonderful thing. It's what makes us human. Denying your emotion that's absolutely how you actually turn to evil, is because you're getting rid of, like, your own agency of your own internal compass, when you're denying emotion. And, there is no ignorance, there is knowledge. Okay, great. Yeah. Like, you can get out of ignorance with knowledge. There's nothing wrong with that part. But that's
still denying that there are ignorant people out there that just don't know certain things.
Yeah. Which, I mean, we could kind of, if we wanted to, like, really analyze, like, the story presented within Star Wars. I mean, Qui-Gon Jinn, played by the incredibly sexy Liam Neeson. I love the fact that he rips on Jar Jar, like it's so funny that, and it's so weird because it's so against the Jedi code. Like, Jar Jar will say, it's like, oh, I speak. And Qui-Gon literally responds with, the ability to speak doesn't make one intelligent. Damn Skippy. like that's genius. You're totally right, Qui-Gon, but that's not very Jedi of you, so I love that. But then there is no passion, there is serenity. What the fuck? Like, what did...
Yeah, it just sounds like they're really trying to say, deny your emotions, don't feel them, just be at peace.
Yeah, deny your desires, don't have attachments, which actually in episode 2 they directly say. There is no chaos, there is harmony. Like, this is something, now granted, Star Wars has never been about being scientifically accurate, okay? But sorry, like, research and evidence says the exact opposite. No, there is chaos everywhere, and it's the order of the universe, and that's okay. In fact, it's even a good thing.
Everything proceeds towards chaos.
Exactly. Right. That's entropy. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, I mean, the universe literally wouldn't function without entropy.
Precisely.
It is times arrow.
Yeah. So to say there is no chaos, it's nice to have harmony. It's nice to strive for that, I suppose. Okay. But harmony in and of itself is not the opposite of chaos, and it's also not the path to anti-entropy. But yeah, to say there is no chaos, that's
just denying reality.
It is. It's very childish. Like, this is very childish stuff. And I know a lot of people might even be screaming, at us, or at least at me through this, saying, look, it's Star Wars. These are kids' movies. And it's like, no, you can't say that. You can't open up a movie like Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, with, the Trade Federation complaining about taxes. Like, no kid gives a rat's ass about taxes. You know what I mean? Like, they don't even know what they are, really. So maybe they should, but
not to mention this has been around for 40 years at this point?
Yeah,
50?
Right. What's the average age of a Star Wars fan? It's got to be my age, 42. Like, these aren't just kids movies, and this is the big thing. I've always really had a problem with the idea that adults make entertainment for children, because that just always comes off as weird to me, And I'll give George Lucas a little bit of credit, at least when he is trying to make kid stuff, it's because he was actually asking his children, like, so what do you think we should name this? What do you think this should be the situation here? So I'll give him a little bit of, little devil's due, perhaps, on that. And then, so then, rounding out the Jedi Code, there is no death, there is the Force. Whatever, that has to do with in-universe crap like Force ghosts and all this other stuff. So I'm not necessarily going to argue too much against that. Of course, it's pretty well established that the Sith are all about achieving immortality. Like, that's the ultimate goal of what they're going for. But that, once again, I don't see the problem. Like, what the hell is wrong with wanting to live forever?
Well, I think in universe, the idea is they have to turn their bodies into these monstrosities for that to happen. Mm-hmm. And that's where it gets twisted.
Yeah, if immortality can only come at the cost of other people's lives, okay, I've got a problem with that. But the abstract notion, and basically the moral that Disney and Star Wars is trying to tell, is that, striving for immortality is bad. Fuck no. Walt Disney's head is fucking frozen in Orlando, Florida. Don't fucking tell me, that immortality is a bad thing when your God is fucking, at Kelvin right now, 0 degrees Kelvin. It's nonsense. So anyway, so, we can kind of stop on this. I think, just going over the codes is really enough. There's plenty of issues with the Jedi. The fact is, the Jedi, they became warmongers. And you can say, oh, well, but the Sith were pulling the strings. Well, yeah, but I thought they were the fucking best. They should have known better. Fortunately, you get within Disney Star Wars where Yoda admits, oh, fuck, we should have never fought a war. Of course, even in The Empire Strikes Back, Yoda says wars not make one great. Fucking right. But the Jedi clearly did not learn that lesson. The Jedi destroyed themselves, and they destroyed themselves, honestly, through their own haughtiness, through their own belief. I would argue in this harmony, that they are going for harmony and that harmony is necessary. This is, kind of the new argument that gets made for a lot of wars within Hollywood productions, is that, and we've talked about it before, it's not about peace, it's about global stability, right? Or it's about stability. And that's really what you're arguing for is harmony, is that, oh, no, we can't have war. And the argument is that war is chaos and that you need to bring it into harmony, when it's like, no, embrace the chaos. And then war arguably wouldn't happen because no one's trying to bring order to fucking anything. And so this is the mess that the concept of the Jedi get into. As to where the Sith, now I'm not going to say the Sith are the good guys, but at the very least, they are living with the least amount of fictions. Meaning that they're the egoists. They're the ones, no, they understand how the universe works. Granted, they are engaging in things that I don't think are ultimately helpful, because egoism can itself be, in a way, altruistic. Okay, in that you realize that helping others or making the world around you beneficial to all actually props yourself up and empowers you. That would be what some would call like an altruistic egoism. So they get that wrong. But what makes the Sith the more appealing to me, again, is that they are the characters within Star Wars that are living with the least amount of fictions, which is a funny thing and an ironic thing to say about a fictional universe. But that's where we're at.
Is there a Sith character that you like the most?
Oh, I love Palpatine. I mean, yeah. I mean, I dig him just because, like, he is not because of like necessarily in universe, because we actually don't know a whole ton about him. But there's a great YouTube documentary about how Palpatine is such a unique and different movie villain than any other villain that's ever been made. And it's really well done. If I think of it, I'll put it in the show notes, because it's totally spot on how he's so radically different. He's really the ultimate victor. Like he actually did it. In every other movie you watch the villain who's like, yeah, I'm going to take over the world. Like we watched The Spy Who Loved Me last week or whatever. And Stromberg, has this plan. Didn't actually sound half bad, but but he has this plan, but it always gets stopped, right? And you always have these villains who, I'm going to conquer the universe. I'm going to take over the world. I'm going to do this. Right. And they never pull it off. The amazing thing about Palpatine, he did it. He actually won. Like it's such a ballsy thing, to have in a movie. So I really love him for that. But
because he got his victory.
Yeah, because he did it, and it's funny too, even like with Darth Vader, another one, there are so many kids you can actually, I want to say, I can't think of the documentary where this was talked about, but everybody was kind of talking about their favorite Star Wars characters. And so many people brought up Darth Vader as their favorite character. And this is before the prequels even. And the reason they were saying it is because every kid loves the fact that, no, here's a guy who doesn't take any fucking shit, and you get in his way, force choke, get out of here, and that's so, in a way, I mean, yes, that's a very extreme way of dealing with your problems, but at the same time, like, you could say it's a power fantasy. Okay, fine. I have a problem with that kind of idea that people really get tripped over, especially today. But at the same time, like I feel like kids love Darth Vader for the same reason that they love dinosaurs, because it's something that because a lot of kids, rightfully so, are terrified of their parents. And I'm not, when I say rightfully so, I'm not saying that it's right that parents are scary. It's the opposite direction that I mean that I understand why kids are afraid of their parents, because their parents are fucking assholes. Their parents are not mature, probably should have never had a kid in the first place, and are not treating their kid. They're not being the stewards that they should be to their children. Okay. And so, I think a lot of kids love dinosaurs because they are this thing that is so large that all the scary things in the world today would even be afraid of. And I think Darth Vader is a very similar situation. Okay. So, it's not about a power fantasy. It is about a need to feel not afraid, and so, I think the Sith can kind of be, appealing within that. One point I want to, before I answer your question, one point I want to make really, really fast is that in the original George Lucas made 6 films, it is made absolutely clear that the only way to beat a Sith Lord is to give in to the dark side. You have to get angry. It's every time. Obi-Wan doesn't beat Vader. Not really, or not in the end when you get to episode 4. Obi-Wan beats Darth Maul because he gets pissed because Qui-Gon gets killed. Okay, spoiler alert. Luke Skywalker takes off Darth Vader's hand and finally makes him yield by getting angry. Okay, like every single fucking time. It's, how does the Jedi beat the big bad Sith Lord? It's getting angry. How does Count Dooku get stopped? It's because, and Anakin says it straight, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have given in to my anger, and he did. Okay, so, Star Wars actually, ironically, George Lucas, in a backhanded way, gave the right message, that anger is energy and focus. Okay, and that you actually can't win if you don't, in that kind of fight. Now, I'm not one for those kinds of fights, so I'm not arguing for that, but I'm just saying that he actually struck at the truth, even though he didn't. I think he was trying to say the exact opposite, that no, you don't want to do that. But wait a minute, every time they won, it was by giving into the dark side. Anyway, I just want to get that point out there quickly. Just another problem with the Jedi. Favorite Sith Lord, I had a lot of favorite ones when in the old EU before Disney bought it, that I thought were really great. So, they don't really count anymore. Like, I really loved Ulic Qel-Droma. There were some others, but yeah, unfortunately, Disney has really neutered the Sith in their run. We'll see. They have a show coming out called The Acolyte that's supposed to be about the Sith, and we'll find out. So, anyway, thank you for asking that. But I think that led to a lot of other things. Do you have any thoughts you want to share on anything that I said? Do you want to, like, should you divorce me over this because I'm rooting for the bad guys? I don't know.
Wow.
No.
That was a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like I just got blasted by a stun gun with all of that Star Wars information.
I know it's madness. I tried to be brief. I tried.
So basically what you're saying is Jedi are idealists and they're not practical, and it's not really anything to idealize anyway because it's just going to create more personal issues. Yep. Whereas the Sith are, at least people that can pursue their dreams and their passions, and they're not being hypocritical.
Yeah. It actually, you put it in a good way. It's idealists versus realists. And the idealists, I like being an idealist myself. I have very high ideals for sure. But
you can't let your ideals get in the way of getting stuff done.
Yeah, right. Well, that's
right?
the thing. You yeah, exactly. And you can't live with the fictions. Like, they either have to be so or they're not. And that's the problem. Is like we said, no, the universe operates on chaos. There is chaos. Emotions are real and are a part of who you are. It's not that there is no emotion. So
yeah, they have to be expressed. Otherwise, It turns into something that's unhealthy.
Yeah, exactly. So they're living with a lot of fictions. They're literally their very existence is an existence of lies, of lies and denial, which is so funny because everybody's like, oh no, the Sith are the liars or whatever. No, they're the honest ones. It's the Jedi that are the ones that live with lies. So anyway, okay. Do we want to talk about some real evil? Do we want to talk about Salem's Lot?
We can do it.
We can do it. All right, we're going to do this. We're going to do this fast. Okay, so 1979, Salem's Lot miniseries, CBS, becomes this huge cult hit, based off of a Stephen King novel. And yes, there are differences from the novel. Honestly, I don't think that really matters. I mean, certainly one thing to consider is that, again, it's a TV miniseries, so budget constraints are certainly a thing. So you got to do things right, or you have to do things that will fit the budget, fit the time slot that you have. This is, again, it was originally a miniseries, but the way you watch it now, I have it on disc. It runs about about 3 hours. So you can watch it in one sitting if you have that kind of time. Okay. And this is a vampire story. It's a classic vampire story. In fact, when you watch it, you'll suddenly realize how many other vampire movies have lifted, so much from this. What would be at the time very much an ensemble cast, even though they may not be names that today would be recognized, like Lou Aries and some others. But this was a big deal. And you and I watched it, Ellen, because you saw a top 5 list from Alice Cooper of his 5 favorite horror films, right?
Right.
Okay. And this was his top 1.
There was, this surprises people when I give them my list of horror movies that really were scary. The original Haunting, with Claire Bloom, and that was truly a scary movie, and you never saw a monster. You never once saw anything except you heard it. And it was in black and white, and it was truly scary. Suspiria, Argento's Suspiria made you want to take a shower afterwards. And, it was just so creepy. The movie was creepy. If all of you do a little homework, go back and watch Salem's Lot. Truly, 5 or 6 scenes in the original Salem's Lot are some of the best, and probably the best vampire I've ever seen. Barlow was definitely, I can't give you a picture of this. I'm watching this movie, and the guy keeps saying, "Oh, Mr. Barlow would love to meet you. Love to meet you." And you're going, "Is this Mr. Barlow?" 3/4 through the scene, and through the whole movie, you just keep hearing about Mr. Barlow. There's a guy lying in a jail, and all you see is just this, and you hear the jail open, and he kind of clears his eyes and he looks up. The full screen is Barlow with the yellow eyes, and if you don't know who Barlow is, look it up, Google it. I went, "Oh!" And my daughter was 5 years old, and she went like this and ran into a wall. And my wife went, "Oh!" What? It was truly terrifying. The timing of it, Tobe Hooper directed it, and the timing of it was so good. After that, I just sat there like this. Wow. There was another scene where the guy is sitting at the wheel in a rocking chair, and he's in the dark, and the guy says, I forget his name in the movie, but he looks up and he goes, "Teacher. Teacher." And he has white eyes, and I went, "Holy crap, this is good." And go back and watch this movie. The kid floating in the air and scraping on the window. "Let me in." Oh, great stuff. And it was a made-for-TV movie. Yeah, and you sit there and you go, really? This is made for TV? Because it was totally terrifying. One of the great movies of all time. And the music in it set it up perfectly. The music was amazing, and it still holds up. I'll watch it today and still go, this really works. This movie really works. That's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Thank you, Alice. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for your question.
So I got it on disc, and it's like, okay, yeah, we're gonna watch it. We watched it. What were your thoughts on the film? Do you want to open it up with a ranking, or what? I mean, it's an old movie. It's meant for TV, so there's not a lot of gore. And okay, it's the 70s. Like, we got that. Maybe I'll open it with this. Did you find this to be a scary film?
Yes.
You did? Tell me more.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just go into like a review in general of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as whether it was scary or not, yeah, this movie was really made to build tension, and that is something it did really well. It is a 3-hour-long movie, but that allows for a lot of that build up to happen.
Yes.
And there's some cool tricks that the camera does with the way scenes are shot that allow for that to happen. There's some strange encounters between the main character and the purported main protagonist. Or antagonist, I should say. Although you find out that he's not actually the main antagonist. He's just like the servant or the butler.
Yeah, he's working for Barlow.
Yeah. Someone who you never see in the movie until like the last hour.
Yes.
And even then, you get a couple brief instances where you glimpse his face. Or you see Barlow, doing something, but it's just very brief. The first shot of the vampire was terrifying because, again, super brief, but it's a close-up of his face.
Yeah.
And you see his fangs and everything, and it's just ugly and scary, but it's so fast.
Yeah.
And Barlow is, like, the main villain, but then there's all these other side villains, like, people in town start disappearing, and then
it's this little Maine town called Salem's Lot.
Maine, the state. It's a town in the state of Maine called Salem's Lot. Very small population. The people that are disappearing at first are children, because they're the easiest to capture.
Yeah, of course.
And then the children will reappear a couple days later or the next day in people's dreams. But the terrifying thing is that these people, when they're dreaming, they're almost in a hypnotic trance. And they don't exactly remember everything that happens. But the vampire children will like lure people to open the windows for them, and then they'll feed. And the victims will wake up the next day saying, I had this weird dream. I don't remember exactly everything that happened, but I pictured that person that went missing. And then they're like anemic and they have to go to the hospital, and they don't know why they're so tired all the time.
Right.
So they're getting these mysterious symptoms, and then suddenly they die and their body disappears too. And so it's this very slow progression of like people disappearing, people getting sick and dying and disappearing. And then later on, much later, you find out that like they're actually all at the vampire's house.
Yeah, this like haunted house in town that everybody kind of knows about and everybody's kind of creeped out about.
Oh God, and it's so creepy when you find out about the house too, because the house is one of the main features of this film. So I think the movie or the book was kind of autobiographical on Stephen King's part, because it takes place in Maine. It's about an author. He goes back to his hometown.
Sure.
Everybody knows him because he wrote these books. He's then writing a book about this house that's in Salem's Lot that he believes is evil. Like the house itself is evil.
Right.
And he's renting a room, looking at the house every day. Sometimes he'll even drive up to it. And when he gets out of the car to look at the house, or maybe he just sits in the car and watches it, but like the butler, the servant will walk past, and they won't even say anything to each other. They'll just stare at each other for a long moment, and then he'll keep walking.
Right.
And he goes into the house, and you can see lights are on inside, but you don't know what's going on. So there's a very ominous mystery surrounding this house. And then at the very end, you get to actually see what's inside the house.
Yeah.
So there's a female character, main female protagonist. She is like following this child into the house who's going to get revenge for like his brother's death. She goes into the house, and for the first time ever, you see what's actually in there. And the whole movie, you're given the impression that Barlow is this really rich antique dealer.
Yeah.
And they're opening up this antique shop in town, hoping to attract a lot of new business, new people to Salem's Lot, because they're selling goods from like London, England, and all over the world. So you expect when you go into this house that it looks like this, beautifully, richly decorated mansion. But instead, when she goes in, it's like dilapidated and gray, and there's like bird shit and feathers everywhere and mold on all of the railings, and things are falling apart, and there's no furniture whatsoever.
Yeah.
So it's like jarring.
Oh,
because you're like, what the hell? I thought like some rich dude lived here.
Yeah, right. It's one of the most amazing sets I've certainly ever seen for a TV miniseries, really any movie. Like, because, and it's huge because there's plenty of shots where you can see somebody walking like upstairs, and then the other person is, down in like whatever is kind of the main like dining room or library or something. Like, it's a massive set. It looks so good. I mean, it's very creepy, but it looks so good. Continue.
Yeah. It's like wet and everything's creaking, and there's like feathers and dust all over the place, and it's just there's like dead animal heads that are stuffed, and like antlers and horns hanging on the wall.
Yep.
Even though there's no other decoration of any kind. So yeah, it's just very weird. Like I said, jarring. And then like the ending scene where you see all of the bodies of the people who disappeared. It takes place in the basement cellar. So they have to go into the cellar to drive the stake through the heart of Barlow.
Right.
And they have to do it while the sun is up, because that's when he's sleeping in his coffin. They go into the cellar, and you just see like, all of these bodies lining the wall, and then slowly they start to like crawl towards the entrance.
Yeah.
And you just see their eyes.
Yeah, the glowing eyes of the vampires in this is a phenomenal effect. Like, it's very creepy.
Yeah. Oh, so creepy. So, like, the fact that there was so much buildup and so much tension, and that the reveals were like shocking yet subdued. I think that makes it very impactful as a movie. They don't have to like hit you in the face with these like loud sounds of like the soundtrack,
Yeah.
Because it's just like the visual and the sudden change in narrative that really slaps you.
Yeah, actually, I didn't really think about that until you just said it. I mean, the music and the score in this is very well done. But, like, they don't pull a lot of the classic horror tricks in this movie. Everything's subdued.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe the most, like, and everything is very quiet. And maybe that's what gives it its ultimate creepiness is just, like, the silence of a lot of these moments. Like, there's the point where Lou Ayres' character, Jason, is seeing, this friend of his, or this guy he knows in town, because it's a small town, so everybody knows everybody, Michael, who's been turned into a vampire. And he's just sitting there in a rocking chair, and everything's just quiet. And it never gets to a point where, like, it gets loud, because I hate this in horror movies, is when they do the whole, like this big musical hit, or some crazy scream out of nowhere just to get you to jump. Don't scare me with the jump, because you know what? Like, I know when the jump's going to happen, and I'm actually going to plug my ears, and it's not going to have the effect anyway. Okay, because I don't like it. I don't like that. This movie, like, rarely, if ever, relied on the jump, other than maybe Barlow's first appearance.
Right.
Which is so well done, because they make you wait so fucking long. It's worth it. Okay. But otherwise, like, even when Michael's like talking to the guy, he's not like, rah, he's actually he's whispering. He's like, teacher, and oh, that's so good. I didn't even think about that until you just said it. I think that is part of what makes this a very powerful film, is how subdued it is in its terror, I guess we'll say.
Yes.
If you want to keep going, go for it.
Just this, like, to carry on with what you were just saying, even when you see the vampire children showing up to the houses, that's very quiet as well. They're floating in like ghosts almost, and they've got these clouds of vapor around them, and all you hear is their nails scratching on the window.
Right. Yeah, and crazy thing. So I actually, because I was intrigued by this when I saw it, that effect, I was like, wow, that effect is so good. How did they do that? Because look, when you use strings to hold people up, you're going to see the strings at some point. It was the singular effects flaw in the first Matrix film. As you can see, there's a point where you see Keanu Reeves grab onto the strings. And I was like, there's no strings. And so turns out they were actually using like a boom crane for that effect. So they did not use strings. And the shots in the window they ran them in reverse. So that added to the creepiness effect. Yep. And and you're right. It's still that quiet and that subduedness. All you're hearing is the fingernails, and the smoke effect. Oh, it's man, that's genius. Computers can't even, you wouldn't even think to do that with computers. You'd only think to do that with practical effects. That's so cool. Continue.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, all these things make the movie really creepy.
Yeah.
I think there's some other parts of the movie that were really interesting that they included. Like, there's subplots going on in addition to all of these people dying and going missing.
Boom Boom Bonnie.
Yeah, Boom Boom Bonnie. Bam Bam Betty. I don't know. So there's like this woman who's cheating on her husband. Her husband pretends like he's leaving on a road trip so that he can catch her cheating on him. And he does. And he's like holding both of them at gunpoint. But you find out that the gun's not actually loaded. And then the next day he's disappearing out of town with his wife.
Yeah.
And the way that he was talking to her was just so... It was horrible. I mean, that's my one complaint about this movie, is that all of the men in this movie treat women like they're property, or like they're stupid, or like they're doing the wrong thing if they don't listen to them.
Yeah, it's one of the things that's product of its time. Either product of its time, or it was a way for them to this is how people acted in small towns at the time.
Yeah.
Maybe it was more of that, but I'm with you on that.
Maybe, but there was also the part where on multiple occasions a woman would walk into her son's bedroom and say, "Keep it down, don't disturb your father." And,
I know.
And like he's doing his quarterly taxes.
Yeah.
Don't make a noise. Don't let him know that you exist.
Yeah.
And I even said to you after we finished watching it, like, do you think that the point of this movie was to say that, like, if women don't listen to their husband or their boyfriend, that they're, like, stupid and they're doing the wrong thing? Because that's kind of how the movie ends.
The message is there because, like, Susan, the main female lead and love interest, does get told by the hero, go to Boston. Go back to Boston now. Leave town.
Yeah.
Don't come back. And if she did, the movie would have ended very different. We'll just say that. Okay.
You might as well talk about it.
Yeah. Well,
this is an old movie.
No, it's true. She ends up becoming a vampire. And, but if she had left, wouldn't have happened, and she ends up getting killed at the end. Now, so your thesis, like, I think is on. Like that is an undercurrent, right? Which is annoying. It's just like we were talking about with Star Wars, where it's like, oh no, be a Jedi, be in harmony and all this stuff. But wait, the only way the people win is by getting angry, which is the exact opposite message you were trying to send. This is like one of those low key messages that's in there. It's kind of weird just how prevalent it is. I think you're onto something there.
Yeah. Like, oh, you didn't listen to me, so now I have to stab you in the heart.
Right.
When he could have just become a vampire along with her.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yes. Thank you. I want to talk about that for a second. Okay. So as far as we can tell, and maybe in the vampire lore of Salem's Lot, which there's a sequel, by the way, which is very different, and I don't necessarily recommend it, though we'll probably watch it at some point. Okay. Maybe like Barlow, as you get older, you end up looking a lot less human and you become more Nosferatu-like, which Barlow does. So maybe that's the situation. But it seems like, at least for a good while, you more or less just look young and you stay young. And in fact, that's what Susan says is Barlow's promise, is that you'll always be young. Like, when Susan is a vampire at the end, she doesn't look like scary or really, I mean, she has the eyes, But honestly, I could even see those eyes being kind of endearing, you know? And like, this bothers me with most, not all, but many vampire films is, wait, why the fuck are you fighting these people? Why wouldn't you become a vampire? Like who wouldn't make that choice? Like, I'm really baffled by the person who says, oh yeah, if I got offered to be a vampire and live forever, you know, that they wouldn't take it.
Yeah, I think the problem is that they had to kill their victims.
Yeah, but even then, like, most people don't, like, honestly, most people don't have a problem with murder. Most people don't have, like, they don't. I mean, they support the military. Most people don't have a problem with, I mean, even like if you're, oh, but I'm going to be holden to the will of my master. And it's like, well, what? You have a president. How different is that? You know? And that's kind of my thing. In conventional thinking, I don't believe that anybody would actually say no to a vampire.
Yeah, the only justification they give in this movie is that they're like the spawn of Satan, and that's why you can't be a vampire, is because they're evil, and everyone in this town has like crosses to fend off the evil.
Yeah, which, whatever. But yeah, right. I mean,
Yeah.
it works within it. And that's a conventional trope. That's fine. Yeah. I mean, it's like, oh, well, I'm going to have to kill humans. And it's like, well, you didn't mind, you know, eating that chicken earlier or whatever else. It's like, don't tell me you have some kind of crazy respect for life.
Or like, yeah, wars are justified.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so
Right.
why don't you do the murder instead of like having somebody else do it for you?
Yeah. Or do what Louis did in Interview with the Vampire and just like drink the blood of rats. I don't know. Like, it just...
Yeah, if that worked in this lore. I don't know.
Right.
Like, it depends on which series or which movie you're watching.
Yeah, fair.
But like, there's different rules for vampires.
Fair. Yeah. So, but it falls prey to that. And it's like, no, come on, man. You know, like, you're not going to want to spend, you know, forever with this gal. Give me a break. Anyway. So all that kind of out of the way. I mean, the atmosphere of this movie, it's so good. Like, like they really, really got it down. And if anything, I actually think it's a better film because it's not very gory, because it doesn't rely overall. Like, what makes this such a great movie to me is that it doesn't rely on the common horror Hollywood tricks.
Yeah, honestly, there's like no blood
No.
whatsoever in this movie.
Yeah, no.
You get to see a single drop on somebody's shirt.
Yeah. And maybe when like a guy gets put through a certain thing in the house, like, or whatever, like, but yeah, in general, right. There's no blood. You're right. And that even adds to it more because like when you do finally see, like, say that single drop, it's all the more like scary because, oh shit, the vampire's going to want that.
They made a mistake.
Yeah. So, oh man, it's so well done. I mean, the acting, yeah, to some degree it's 70s TV acting, but there's some great actors in this actually that have done some really cool stuff.
I thought it was great.
Yeah, I did too overall. I think there are people who have this idea that, oh, acting sucked, 40 years ago. No, that's not true. So, but anyway, we were, and I'll take 1 second on this as well. We were really blessed with amazing miniseries in the 70s and 80s, like grand fucking epics, because at the time TV still really mattered. It's seemingly a lost art, even though we're excited to watch FX's version of Shogun. That's a miniseries. I'm intrigued to see that. But in general, I don't think we don't have the same amount of like just these really high end miniseries like we had back in the day, like Noble House or the original Shogun from 1980 or V, or there's a laundry list of them, America. There's a bunch of them that we could talk about. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm tempted to give this. I mean, I'm almost tempted to give this a 10 out of 10. Like, I totally see why Alice Cooper said this is his favorite horror movie, because, man, it bucks every trend and sets a bunch, How about you? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think when we talked about this last, I said if I was just judging it based off of horror movie standards, I would give it like a 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
The fact that this is a movie made in the 70s and women and children are treated so badly.
Yeah.
Just as order of the day, it makes me want to take my ranking down.
Oh, yeah.
I can't really blame the movie for that, but yeah, it was shitty the way that they treated women.
Yeah.
And I really wish that was different. But I wouldn't change any aspect of the horror in this movie. I think it's great, except maybe adding a little more blood.
Yeah, it could have used a little bit more. Yeah, okay. Well, all right. So I'm going to go with 9 out of 10 as well as a horror movie. I'm going to go with that. And so you're going 9 out of 10 as far as like a horror movie goes.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is how I feel about it.
Yeah, I think it's important to rank it kind of within its genre. Unless somehow it had broader things to say, which I don't think it does.
No,
this
it
is
seems
just
like it's
horror.
hinting at some, but it doesn't actually go into any of that.
Yeah, no, it's just horror done right, and it's about being horror. It's not about being something more than that, which sometimes horror movies are, but this isn't one of those. So, okay, yeah, 9 out of 10. So it's a classic, 79. And I don't even think it's a cult classic. I think it's just a straight up classic today. And definitely recommend. The Blu-ray itself was gorgeous, like the transfer that they did for that. I mean, yes, you can tell it's a movie from the 70s, and that a TV movie for that matter is from the 70s. But everything is very sharp, and all most of the effects look really, really good. Some of them being very unique, even, which is a real standout. So, and like I said, the acting, I thought all that was on point. Writings, dialogues, on everything's on. All right, do we want to wrap this baby up?
I think we're ready to wrap up.
Yeah, we did. We kept it at 2 hours. We didn't go 3.
Nice.
So,
Okay.
Which is great. Anyway, everyone, of course, fundraiser.sovereigntech.com to help take all of this to the next level. Your donations are greatly appreciated. Ellen, always great to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll wrap this one up, and we'll see all of you on the other side.
Thank you for listening to Sovryn Tech X. This part of the journey is over, but the story of Sovryn Tech
It's just beginning.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.